You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. And as we're doing pre-lockout, we're continuing to go through all of the teams and the farm systems. And I figured what better way to honor the world champion Atlanta Braves than to bring on the host of Locked On Braves, Jake Mastroianni. Welcome to the show. Excited to have you. Personally, for me, as an Atlanta fan, thrilled that you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Lindsey. Like I said, and we actually had a listener to the show request this, so appreciate that, and I'm glad to be on here to talk some Braves baseball for sure after the exciting season. And I've had nothing else to do this offseason but dive into prospects, so I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely, and yeah, the listener tweeted the two of us and said, "Hey, I want a podcast where you guys talk about how the Braves use the farm system to win a championship." So, I mean, let's go ahead and let's absolutely do that. And obviously, Braves beat the Astros in 5 games. Wonderful series. I actually was lucky enough to go to Game 3. First time I've ever been to a World Series game in my life. Memory I will never forget. But when you look at how we constructed the roster for the World Series, everybody thinks about the outfielders, how you retooled the outfield on the fly with a bunch of trades. But a good number of those position players that the Braves used in the World Series were guys that came through their farm system, whether it was through international free agency in the case of Ozzie Albies, or a guy they drafted like Austin Riley, or somebody who they got as a minor leaguer and then brought them to Atlanta like Dansby Swanson.
Yeah, and there's this. It almost gets overshadowed because of how good the trades were and how good Soler and Peterson and Duvall and Rosario were, down the second half in the regular season when the Braves took over first place, and obviously in the postseason. It almost gets overshadowed how good the core of the Braves was down the stretch. Austin Riley, having an MVP type season, Freddie Freeman just taking off, Dansby Swanson with the home runs, Ozzie Albies getting going. I mean, yes, the trade deadline moves got them over the hump, but it was still those core pieces that the Braves, acquired and built for this championship run, that did a lot of the work as well in that second half, getting them into the postseason and then helping them succeed in the postseason as well. But, you're right. I mean, this was what all those lean years were for, to build a team like this, to have a core like this where you can go out and make a move at the postseason to plug some holes, but you still had that core there. You still had your Freeman, your Riley, your Albies, your Swanson, your Max Fried, your Ian Andersons. I mean, those were the core of this team, and Rosario and Soler and Duvall, they just helped put them over the top in a great way, in great fashion. Maybe one you couldn't even really imagine, but that core, like you talked about, that they built through the rebuild, I mean, that is still what put this team in a position to win a World Series.
Absolutely. And being strategic with the deals that you make and when to sell on a prospect and when to buy on a prospect. We saw some of the trades. The Aaron Blair trade is one that stands out in my mind just so strongly to me, where you send Aaron Blair to Arizona, you get Dansby Swanson, you get Ender Inciarte, who carries you for a few years leading up to this World Series championship. And that's kind of the hard thing to judge. And that's where a lot of organizations, I feel like, struggle, is knowing when to go in, trade a prospect versus when to hold them. And that's the question we're going to have to answer about some of the guys that we have in AAA now is, should we have traded any of these guys, or should we trade them now to go get pieces to try to keep this team together and make another run?
Yeah. And I think that was the Shelby Miller trade too, right? Where they got
Sure.
Dansby and Ender in that group. And, that was really, when things started to kind of turn around. But to your point, Braves fans have been, on Alex Anthopoulos because he hasn't really made a big prospect trade, and some of these players have lost some of that value where maybe you could have made a big move. Now, it didn't matter. They still won a World Series, so all of that is forgiven, but you still kind of were just waiting for, Alex to trade a Pache. But to your point, the people that other teams were asking for in trade talks, they were Ozzie Albies, they were Austin Riley, they were Ronald Acuna Jr. So, you have to kind of tip your hat to the front office to not give in and trade those really big pieces to try to, maybe get a big established, name a big leaguer. But they held on to those prospects and hold on to those players. And that's what, built this team.
Absolutely. And just a small little almost side note here, but is there a specific move that was proposed in the last couple of years that you think would have been a good decision for the Braves to do that they didn't? Because you've seen some of the things out there about this guy's available, that guy's available, and there's always been proposals. Oh, the Braves could go out and get a guy. And kind of looking back, and I understand you have the benefit of hindsight and the benefit of, well, we won a championship with this group of guys. But when I go back and think about it, a lot of those proposed deals, I don't think any of them, I don't think there's any of them I would go back and take necessarily and say, yes, I would ship out an Austin Riley for a Chris Bryant, for instance, or some of those rumored deals. I can't think of any of those that I would go ahead right now and say they were wrong to not accept that. It feels like everything broke perfectly for Atlanta.
Yeah, there's not a ton that come to mind off the bat for me. One is JT Real Muto, which I know everybody was really high on that happening. I believe they wanted Austin Riley in that deal, maybe some others. And, look, the way the Braves have handled the catcher position really for years now, whether you go back to Kurt Suzuki and Tyler Flowers tandem, and now to Travis, d'Arnaud, and now bringing in Manny Pena to be with him as well. Obviously, they got some young catchers, which I'm sure we'll talk about later coming up, but they really handled that catcher position really well. So I was okay with not doing that deal. The one that I could kind of just think of at the top of my head was in 2020. I really wanted them to trade for Mike Clevinger. I really thought they needed, another frontline starter to get them over the hump last year. Didn't happen, ends up being a good thing, I guess, because Clevinger, obviously injured, missed the rest of that year and this season as well, which, that's just what it is with pitchers. You take that risk. But that was one move I thought I really wanted the Braves to go all in and kind of make that deal, because I thought they could have, and very well they could have, even without him, won the World Series in 2020. But I thought that was a move that they probably needed to make and probably could have. It's hard to say should have, because we know how it's played out, like you said, in hindsight. But that's the one move I can think of where I was really, wanting the Braves to go out and Alex go all in to get that frontline starting pitcher that 2020 team needed.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, the Braves model seems to be building the roster from mostly homegrown talent and international free agents, and supplementing with either a veteran on a 1-year kind of prove it deal, or spending money on multiple years of a veteran, I think a Charlie Morton extension. I think the Marcell Ozuna re-signing. You bring a guy in for a year. If it works out, great. You have the option to sign him. But for the most part, the Braves kind of want to stick with that homegrown core. And the question for me now is, as these guys get closer to free agency, Dansby Swanson has 1 year left, things like that. What decisions are made, who is retained, who moves on. And I think that all kind of comes back to, I'm sure you've talked about it plenty this offseason, the Freddie Freeman situation of how do you bring back Freddie Freeman? How do you replace him if you don't? And as a prospect guy, I look at the farm system and I think there's not a lot of corner infield talent for Atlanta. And so that's something that I worry about if you don't bring back Freeman. But what are your thoughts on the Braves' chosen method to build the roster? Have they been too protective of these prospects, or are they kind of striking the right balance between prospects and free agents?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that they are trying to avoid any long-term big deals that could potentially cripple the franchise. I mean, when you are deliberating this hard over bringing back your franchise player, that tells you how much this front office does not want to get into any dead contract deals. You go back a couple off seasons ago with Josh Donaldson, and they really wanted him back. Braves fans wanted him back. They weren't willing to go to what the Twins went to bring him back, and there was a number Alex had in mind. He wasn't going to go over it, and I think Josh wanted to come back. And then the Marcell Ozuna signing, even they waited on that. I think they wanted to explore all other options. I don't really think Alex wanted to do that deal, but there was nothing else out there he could get that was going to replace that. And so he had to go back to Ozuna and give him that deal, which in my mind, I didn't love now, and I really don't love it now at this point. But, that's just how much they are trying to avoid 4 or 5 year deals with big AAVs like that, because they know how crushing that can be to a franchise. So for me, they are really smart with their money and trying to, like you said, have an influx of prospects coming up, and then just kind of supplement that with, guys on those 1 year deals like we've seen with Charlie Morton and Donaldson and Ozuna in the past. So look, it's worked. They've gotten to the postseason 4 straight years. They've won a World Series. So it's worked. As a fan, it's just like, give them all the money and trade all the prospects. But, it's definitely a good formula, even though it's frustrating from a fan's perspective at time, I think. But hey, you got to trust Alex at this point.
I mean, he's done nothing but engender. I mean, he's earned all of the goodwill just based on the moves at the trade deadline. I remember the conversations about the Braves should sell at the trade deadline. The Braves should go ahead, get rid of some pieces, let some guys go, and regroup for next year. And I'm kind of glad he didn't do that. And he didn't say, we're going to do a whole new fresh start for 22. We're going to punt this season. But speaking of new starts and new years, it is the new year, and that means New Year's resolutions. And if yours is getting fit, eating healthier, make sure you include a Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, probably even better than a candy bar, covered in 100% real chocolate, 130 calories, 17 grams of protein. So my idea is go to all the places you stash candy bars in your life. Maybe it's your car, maybe it's your office, maybe it's, it's your pantry. Throw out all the candy bars, replace them with Built Bars. They've got tons of flavors to choose from: peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream are some of the ones in rotation, and they have limited time flavors as well. So you could go to built.com, check out the list, see what's new. While you're there, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order at built.com. That's promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. So you mentioned these 3 guys earlier, and I kind of want to come back to, or you mentioned some of them, but Cristian Pache, Drew Waters, and Michael Harris. These are kind of the big 3 outfield prospects for Atlanta. We always talk about the big 2, and now it's the big 3. And there's a lot of questions around baseball about what should the Braves do with these guys and what are they going to become. If you look at the 2020 season, the thought going into 2020 is that Cristian Pache is possibly a generational talent. And then when he played in the NLCS, you said, okay, he's ready for the stage. He's ready for the show. And then his start to the year in 2021 offensively was pretty dreadful. And I think there's a big question now. What can Cristian Pache be? What is his ceiling as a major leaguer, given his offensive struggles?
Yeah, look, and his defense honestly wasn't fantastic in the big leagues. Obviously, he had some injuries there. I don't foresee that being a problem going forward, but he's had trouble adjusting. And to be fair, thrown into the fire in the NLCS, and then things just didn't get off to a great start in 2021. Then he had the injuries. He was really good in the second half of 2021, though. I'm really looking forward to look. I've gone on record on the podcast saying, I'm fine with him starting the year as the Braves center fielder if they can't find, anything out there this offseason to potentially upgrade. I want to see what he can do. And he's still really young. I think, people forget that him and Drew Waters both still really young. But, look, if Pache can play Gold Glove defense, and I believe he can and will, we just need him to hit 250, 260, 15 home runs, 15 to 20 home runs. I don't think you need a ton from him offensively if he's going to be that Gold Glove defender. So look, I still believe in Pache. I believe he can be a very good major league center fielder for a long time with the Braves. But there are definitely some question marks with that bat if it will ever come around. I don't ever see him being a perennial 20-plus home run hitter. But again, if he can get 15 to 20, still 15 to 20 bags, hit 260, 270, hitting 7th or 8th in the order, and play Gold Glove defense, I mean, you can live with that knowing you got Ronald Acuna, Ozzy Albies, Freddie Freeman, hopefully, in the middle of that order. So, you can live with that from Pache if he's going to give you that elite Gold Glove defense.
Yeah, and, elite defender, good base stealing ability to get on base. I mean, really what you need from Cristian Pache is you need peak endurance Inciarte. You need Cristian Pache to be the 200 hits of Ender Inciarte. And with that, you're happy. I mean, he's got double plus speed. He's probably one of your fastest base runners in the system. Obviously has the best outfield arm and the best outfield defense. And so, the defense, when he's healthy, the defense is electric. And like you said, it doesn't take much offensively. He's a guy that I feel like missing the 2020 or the 2020 minor league season, having alternate site work, but not having, games to play every day. I feel like he's a guy who kind of got hurt. The guy that is trying to refine his technique and figure out exactly the right handset and the right swing to make him successful. He's a guy that was really hurt. And I hope that the lockout doesn't drag on too long, because I think if he can get a good start in spring training, he can get some early hits, hit well. I think that'll portend well for for giving him the confidence going into 22. And like talking about confidence, that's a thing that Drew Waters has in spades, but we haven't necessarily seen that confidence translate to offensive performance from him in the minor leagues.
Yeah, and like I said it a minute ago, Pache and Waters still really young, even for the AAA level. I've never been the biggest Drew Waters fan. I've watched him a couple of times in person. That swing, that approach, it's going to lead to a lot of strikeouts. However, I still think he's the better upside player of the two, because I think he has the potential to be a 20-plus home run hitter, a 20-20 player, and maybe not Gold Glove defense, but I definitely think he's an above-average defender. So for me, Drew Waters still has the higher upside of the two, because I think he could potentially hit at the top of a lineup and give you some speed, power threat up there and be a really good defender. But he's got to figure out, he's got to cut down on the strikeouts, which he's getting better at. He just has to have a better approach at the plate. I mean, the games I've gone back and watched of him this offseason, it's like he gets in the box with an 0-2 count. It's almost Jeff Francoeur-ish, the way he kind of just steps in there and is just swinging at Ozzy Albies-ish. I mean, let's say it. Ozzy Albies goes up there with an 0-2 count sometimes because he just swings at whatever. It works for him. Maybe it'll work for Drew Waters one day, but he's got to find a better approach at the plate. He's got to cut down on his swing a little bit to avoid all the strikeouts, but the talent is there, that made him a top 20, 30 prospect, however high he was. So I still believe there's a ton of upside with Drew Waters. 2022 is going to be a big year for him. He's obviously going to go back to AAA, got some things to figure out, but I still think the kid can be a very good player. I also think if somebody's going to get traded out of the three that you mentioned, I think it is Drew Waters. Just because if I'm another team, I'm seeing the same thing, and I'm thinking Waters has the biggest upside right now. Maybe Harris does eventually, but I still think Waters has that value at the moment that would be enticing to other teams in trade talks. Yeah,
and he's a guy that he struck out 36% of the time in 2019. He got that down to 31% in 2021, and he got it down to 22% at the end of 2021, like by the end of the season there. So he's making gradual improvement, but I think the question is, like you said, can it stick? And like when he eventually bumps up a level of competition, are those problems going to come back? I mean, if you're if you're swinging at sliders down and away in AAA, what are you going to do when you're facing Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer for a series? And so,
and
say
it's
the
one of those
Alcantara
things
is in
too,
there.
like Austin Riley. I mean, he has had to make adjustments. He is still adjusting. I could see it being a situation where, maybe Waters kind of starts to get to click at AAA and gets to the majors, and he's going to have to adjust again. And how long does that adjustment period take? Because I think that's where he's at now. He's facing major league pitching at the AAA level for the most part, and he's trying to adjust to that. He's going to have to adjust again once he gets to the big leagues, and that's everything with these young prospects is once they get up there, how quickly can they adjust? Because the league is going to adjust to them. We saw it with Austin Riley, came up on fire, the league adjusted, and it's taken him, year and a half to adjust back. So, that's the thing with Waters. I think you're just going to have to be patient. Again, I think the talent is there, but it's clearly, taking him a while to kind of figure it out, that approach, at the major league level or the higher minor league levels.
Yeah, and talking about guys that have the right approach and have the right mindset, Michael Harris, new number 1 overall prospect in the Braves system, and he really feels like he's the best pure hitter in the system. And it's funny because a lot of scouts back in 2019 wanted him as a pitcher, as a left-handed pitcher. He would hit 93 on his fastball, had a good-looking curveball, but the Braves said, no, we're going to take you in the 3rd round as an outfielder. And now we're talking about a switch hitter. I think he's still a switch hitter. He batted almost exclusively left-handed last year. Has he officially dropped the switch hitting, or is that just a thing?
As far as I know, he's just a left-handed hitter now. I haven't seen him listed as a switch anywhere.
Okay, so he has just gone to lefty now. He's a guy where he only hit 7 home runs, and I think some of that is just the physical development. He's even younger than Pache and Waters. I mean, he's born in 2001. So he's a younger guy. And as he fills out, I think that power is going to come. But he definitely does a great job at being aggressive when he needs to and making sure that he's getting good pitches to hit. And it's a talent that, one, I wish he could just teach it to Waters, to Drew Waters.
Right.
But then also it's a sign of maturity for an offensive approach that not a lot of guys at the lower levels of the minor leagues really have at this point in their careers.
Yeah, look, I'm the hype has almost gone too much on Michael Harris at this point, but it's warranted. And look, I was all over him going into the 2021 season. I love the kid. Nothing I've watched this offseason has changed that opinion. I do love him, but the hype is almost getting a little too much at the moment. But you're right about the approach. I mean, every game I went back and watched of him, it was just like it was a battle for the pitcher at the plate. And you love to see that. Again, he was considered kind of just a raw athlete coming out of high school, and to just already have that approach and mindset at the plate. You just hope that continues as he gets up into the higher levels. But again, went back and watched some of his games this offseason, just blown away. I mean, the average started to fall in the second half. And so I was curious. And that's where I was watching games in the second half. And look, every game I watched, he was hitting lasers just right at people. It was just a little bit of bad, unluck that he was having at the end. He was still hitting the balls hard, putting the ball in play, not striking out a ton. Just the luck wasn't so much on his side there, in at least the games, that I watched. So I really love this kid, but you're absolutely right about the approach. It is already a mature approach. Again, have to see how that continues as he likely will start 2022 at AA, which is a big jump for minor league prospects, as you know. So going to be a big year for him in 2022. If he excels at that level, then the hype train will really be coming through at that point. But the power is the one thing. He can be a 5-tool player. Right now he's a 4-tool player until he proves, he can be a 15, 20 home run hitter. And we just haven't seen that right now. And AA South is not a great place to prove that. That's a really tough league to hit home runs in. So I still would like to see him get close to 15 home runs. If he did that, look, my hype level would be through the roof. So that's what I'm looking for him this year, obviously, to show some more of that power. And again, the games I've watched, there was a lot of balls that he stung and they just died at the warning track. Again, I don't know that high level ballparks as much as I do the AA South ballparks. So maybe that's a factor, but I also just think there's another just little thing I saw in his swing is he wasn't getting to his lower half as much. And, obviously if he starts to figure that out a little bit, I think that's going to help generate some more power. But he also just sprays the ball everywhere. I mean, a lot of hits were just, left center field, just rockets that were coming off the bat. So I love the kid. I love his swing. I love, his presence in the box. He carries himself like a big leaguer already. So I'm really impressed with Michael Harris. Can't wait to see what he does.
Yeah, the interesting thing I noticed about his home runs is every one of his home runs, all 7 of them were on the road. And so I definitely do think there's a ballpark factor there. But he reminds me, and I'm hesitant. Listeners of this show know I'm hesitant to do player comps because I don't want to give people the wrong idea of who a prospect is. But he reminds me of Jason Hayward as far as high on base percentage, good defender with a plus arm, hits the ball hard, but just doesn't rack up a ton of home runs. And it sounds like he took, when Freddie dropped the BABIP curse last year, it sounds like Michael Harris kind of picked it up. And you always got to have somebody stuck with the curse. But his profile reminds me a lot of like that first or second year Jason Hayward of, 110, 114 exit velo, but it's a line drive into the gap and he's taken 2, maybe stretching to 3 versus crushing home runs under the short porch and Wright.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Jason Hayward comp a little bit. I'll be honest, I wasn't much into prospects at that time, so I don't really remember, what Hayward was like at the minor league level. Obviously, at the major league level, he became a ground ball machine to second base. I don't necessarily see that happening for Harris, but that left-handed, swing, again, I can see some of the comparisons there. I do think he'll be a very good defensive outfielder. Everybody that I've heard or talked to watching Michael Harris said that he can be every bit as good as Cristian Pache. Obviously Pache gets the highest marks for defense in the Braves system. But from what I hear, Michael Harris is right behind him and would be second on that list. So I think he's going to be a very good defensive player. Again, if the power doesn't come, I see him being a 280, 350 type of player. Getting on base a lot, like you said, still having a very good hit tool, being able to steal 20 bags. So even if the power doesn't come, we're talking about a very good major league player in my mind. Yeah.
And we teased it earlier, but in just a second, I want to talk about those catchers, those big 2 catchers. But first, I know there's less football being played right now, but betonline.net has a ton of stuff to bet on this playoff season. I mean, you can do points scored, player performance props, where fired coaches are going. You can bet on the Brazilian presidential election right now. I mean, BetOnline is the #1 spot for all things betting in 2022. Not just football, that's what everybody thinks about with the big game coming up, but basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC. I mean, their odds coverage is the best in the business. BetOnline is your fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports and play your favorite games because BetOnline is where the game starts. So we've both touched on it a bit, but Shea Langeliers and William Contreras, the 2 big catchers for the Braves. Obviously, one of them has the pedigree of being a Contreras. His brother Wilson plays for the Cubs as of now. There's been rumors they want to move him as well. Shea Langeliers, the high draft pick that you come in. Most people now have Langeliers rated above Contreras. As somebody who kind of pays a lot of attention to this system, kind of push you on the spot a bit. Do you think that that's probably the right ranking, or is it they're so close it doesn't necessarily matter?
Yeah, no, I definitely like Shea Langeliers better overall. I think he's just a more well-rounded player. Obviously, everybody knows he's great defensively, but I think he's also going to be a 250 hitter that gives you 25 home runs, 20 to 25-ish home runs, which you'll take from your catcher for sure. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I like Langeliers overall. I just think he's the more well-rounded, polished player. Obviously, college player coming out of Baylor. And that's no slight at Contreras, who I think will be a really good hitter. I just think he has a long way to go defensively. So I would put Langeliers ahead of Contreras at this point. And I know everybody's talking about wanting to trade. William Contreras could be the odd man out in trade talks. That definitely could happen. And, I would understand it. For me, it would have to be for a big piece. I wouldn't just trade him because you have Langeliers there and you have him ranked ahead. Good catchers are hard to come by. And I think the Braves have two really good young ones in Langeliers and Contreras. There's nothing wrong with holding on to both of them. But if, the Braves find a trade package for a frontline starter or a big outfield bat and the other team, prioritizes Contreras in that trade, I wouldn't hesitate to move him, and I don't think the Braves would either.
Yeah, and that kind of seems most likely to me is you keep both guys, and I guess right now you have Langeliers at AAA, you have Contreras, I would assume at AA, because you do have Travis d'Arnaud has been re-signed. You have him for a little bit of time in Atlanta, so you would think you have a bit of runway to get Langeliers into the job. You want Contreras around, but like you said, if there's a chance to go out and get a number 2 starter, there's a chance to go out and get a big outfield bat that can count on you, or if for some reason Freddie Freeman goes somewhere else and you need to replace that. I know you don't want to speak it into existence. The thing that I worry about is the corner infield in the farm for Atlanta is it's bare. The only real, somewhat promising prospect you really had at first was Bryce Ball, and you saw him get moved in the Jock Peterson deal. And so if Freddie Freeman for some reason does not come back to Atlanta, you have to make a move to replace him. And I think maybe that's where Contreras' value goes, as well as one of those outfielders like we talked about, because you've got the 3 between Pache, Waters, and Harris. If you have to make a move, I think that's where you need to spend some prospect capital to try to go out and replace Freddie Freeman.
Yeah, look, if Freddie Freeman goes elsewhere, the only move for the Braves is to get Olson. That's really all there is to it. They have 2 options. You're not going to replace Freddie Freeman, but your best shot at doing that is Matt Olson. So, I understand that. And I don't like the other option either, that some people will say, well, go get Chris Bryant and move Austin Riley to first base. I'm not messing with Austin Riley right now. He has proven that he can play at the hot corner and play really good defense. Obviously, the offense came along last year. I would not mess with him. I'm not touching him at the moment. So for me, it's re-sign Freddie Freeman, which I believe will happen. If not, you got to get Matt Olson. And to do that, if I'm the A's, I don't make a trade with the Braves unless Michael Harris or Shea Langeliers is in that trade, because Matt Olson's one of the best first basemen in baseball. He's under team control for 2 more years at a pretty decent price, most likely $12 million and maybe $15 million the following year. So if I'm the A's and the Braves come calling, I'm saying I got to have Michael Harris or Shea Langeliers. Maybe you can get a package of 3 prospects. I know you had mentioned beforehand, maybe like Contreras and Vodnik and either Pache or Waters. Look, if I'm the Braves, and you don't get Freddie Freeman, I do that in a heartbeat,
Yeah.
But if I'm the A's, I want more than that. If I'm going to give up Matt Olson, knowing the Braves are out of options, they're pretty much out of options. That if Freddie Freeman goes elsewhere, that paints the Braves in a really bad corner, and the A's would know that. So, look, I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but if it does, I think the Braves have the prospects to get it done. But for me, again, if I'm the A's, I got to have Harris or Langeliers in that package.
Absolutely. And kind of last thing for you here is looking at the Braves pitching prospects. There's a lot of guys, and it looks like there's 1 or maybe at best 2 rotation spots open. And so, who seizes that 5th spot? Is it Kyle Muller? Is it Tucker Davidson? Is it Tuki Toussaint? Like, how do you figure out that 5th spot? Because the issue that I think I've noticed, and you saw this with the Bryce Wilson deal where they traded him to the Pirates last year, is Atlanta does not have the runway to let a guy try to figure it out every 5 days in Atlanta. And some of these guys, I feel like a Kyle Wright, have great pedigrees, Vandy boy, just like Dansby Swanson, and pitch well. And the first time that they struggle, they're back on the train to Gwinnett. And so,
yeah, and that's what I've been talking about for a while now, really since 19. I mean, 18 wasn't expected. 19 still, you were kind of in that, okay, we're ahead of the curve here. But once you got to 2020, the Braves didn't have time for these prospects to figure it out. And that, I think that really hurt Bryce Wilson, which you mentioned. I think that's hurt Sean Newcomb, Touki Toussaint, and Kyle Wright, where, you're in a pennant race, especially last year when they fell behind and were trying to come back. They didn't have time for these guys to figure it out at the big league level. You need guys that are going to come in, like Huascar Noah last year. He came in and he produced right away, and he had a great run there. And that's what the Braves need. You get 3 or 4 starts to kind of maybe figure it out. And if you're not showing improvement, you got to go, and we got to find somebody who can. So, that's why they haven't had time for a Sean Newcomb to really get an extended look as a starter, or a Touki Toussaint, because they're just so inconsistent. But you talk about who's going to take that 5th starter spot, and they may need more spots than that, because we don't know how Charlie Morton is going to be, coming back from his injury to start the year. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Mike Soroka, but I think Kyle Wright is the guy. Again, I think this is his year. I mean, to make or break, whatever it's going to be, this is Kyle Wright's year to prove it. Had that great start in the World Series, was great at AAA in 2021. This has got to be it for him. And as long as he comes in spring training and shows what he did in the World Series, showed what he did at AAA last year, continues to be aggressive in the zone, trusting his stuff, I think he'll win that job out of spring training, and then it'll be up to him to be consistent with it. We've seen it with Kyle Wright at times. He just has to be more consistent start to start, and I think he's the one that takes that job.
Great stuff, Jake. If folks want more info about you and about the show, where can they go to find you, to follow you, and get all of that?
Yeah, please make sure you do go over and follow us on Locked On Braves, the podcast. Follow us on Twitter at @LockedOn_Braves. Make sure you get that underscore in there. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall, as it says right down there. But yeah, please do go subscribe to the podcast. I'm on YouTube as well at Locked On Braves, but you can also just go out and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast at Locked On Braves.
And I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. The show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. And as always, if you have questions, we do mailbags every Monday. LockedOnMLBProspects@gmail.com. Stay tuned the rest of the week. We've got Locked On Royals. Come and talk some Bobby Witt Jr. We got somebody mad he's not #1 overall prospect. And then Friday, we're doing our Farm Friday. We're covering the entire National League East. But until then, this has been Locked On MLB Prospects.